a la presentación de la capitana Joy Lee. Ahora a continuación les estaré comentando algunas líneas de su currículum. Joy Lee es farmacéutica de la Administración de Alimentos y Medicamentos de Estados Unidos, en el Centro de Evaluación e Investigación de Medicamentos, División de Información sobre Medicamentos. Es funcionaria del Cuerpo de Comisionado del Servicio de Salud Pública de Estados Unidos. Antes de trabajar en la FDA, se desempeñó como farmacéutica clínica y gerente de farmacia durante 14 años en las instalaciones del Servicio de Salud para Indígena en los Estados Unidos. Se siente muy honrada de dirigirse a la Asociación de Química y Farmacia del Uruguay, y sus opiniones personales expresadas no representan necesariamente las opiniones de la FDA de los Estados Unidos. Muchas gracias, Joy Lee, y te damos la palabra y la bienvenida para tu exposición.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Let me share my slides. Thank you so much. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and for your patience while I get these slides up. As you already kindly shared, I am a pharmacist, like many of you in this organization, and I'm honored to be speaking with your organization about how the US FDA approves drugs. I was asked to speak about what the FDA reviews before a drug can be marketed in the United States, and also speak a little bit about emergency use authorizations and FDA's response during the pandemic. As was mentioned, I came to FDA in 2018, and before that, I served as a clinical pharmacist. This is the disclaimer that was already mentioned. In this talk, I'm going to first start off with an overview of what our agency does and how it's organized, and then go into what was requested for this presentation, which is how drugs are approved at the FDA and also emergency use authorizations. I will leave you with some resources, including how to contact me or FDA if you have questions in the future. FDA is an agency within the US Department of Health and Human Services, and our mission is to protect public health in the United States, to make sure that drugs and other medical products are available, safe, and effective. And FDA is organized into different centers depending on how products are regulated. So there's differing regulatory requirements for each type of product. We assure safety and effectiveness of human drugs and veterinary drugs, vaccines, other biological products for human use, and medical devices. We're also responsible for the safety and security of food, cosmetics, dietary supplements, products that give off radiation, and tobacco products. I work for the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, which I'll refer to as CDER. And this is what we'll focus on today, the activities at CDER. I mentioned the mission of FDA is also the mission of CDER to ensure that safe and effective drugs are available to people in the United States. Within CDER, I work for the Division of Drug Information, and we are staffed by a team of around 40 pharmacists and other healthcare professionals. And our mission is to optimize CDER's educational and communication efforts to the global community in support of the agency's mission to protect and promote public health by providing timely, accurate, and useful information through both traditional channels and social media channels. We provide education to the general public as well as to targeted audience such as small business, industry, and healthcare professionals. Next, we're going to dive into how drugs are approved in the United States. And we'll start off with watching a video.
For your patients. So here are 5 things to know about how FDA approves a drug for use. It starts when a drug is investigated and screened. Generally, new drugs are tested on animals before people. Additionally, in some cases, multiple species are used to gather information on the safety of the compound being investigated. the drug sponsor submits an investigational new drug application, an IND, to the FDA based on the results of the initial testing. The application is required to include the drug's composition as well as the details of its manufacturing. The IND presents a plan for testing the drug on humans. The FDA reviews the plan to determine if the proposed clinical trials will put human subjects at unreasonable and significant risk of illness or injury. Generally, there are 3 phases to a clinical trial in humans. Phase 1 emphasizes safety and typically includes 20 to 80 healthy volunteers. Phase 2 emphasizes effectiveness and typically includes hundreds of patients with a certain disease or condition. Phase 3 typically includes thousands of patients and is used to gather more information about the safety and effectiveness in different populations and different doses. After the clinical trials are complete, the FDA looks carefully at all the animal and human testing data, reviews the drug labeling information, and inspects the facilities where the drugs will be manufactured to determine if the new drug is safe and effective. Because it's not possible to predict all of a drug's effects during clinical trials, monitoring safety issues after drugs get on the market is critical. The role of FDA's post-marketing safety system is to detect adverse events and take regulatory action when needed. That's 5 things you need to know about the drug approval process.
From that video, you saw that the drug approval process actually begins with the research that is done even before a drug can be submitted for approval, or an application can be submitted for approval. I also want to emphasize that FDA has regulatory authority over drugs and drug firms. The authority is established under regulations that industry must comply with. So it's important for you all to understand that industry has responsibilities to comply with regulations also. Let's take a step back. Even before a manufacturer submits an application for approval, FDA works with researchers on drug development. So let's take a look at the drug development process, which FDA is very closely involved with. Up until this century, prescribing and taking drugs was a risky business for doctors and patients. Little was known about drugs and no scientific standards existed. Sometimes medicines caused illnesses rather than curing or preventing them. The new U.S. drug review process assures that new drugs are safe and effective. CDER's public health mandate is to get beneficial drugs onto the market as quickly as possible and keep unproven and dangerous drugs off the market. Early in the 1990s, CDER started reforming the drug review process to speed the delivery of new drugs to consumers while preserving high standards of quality and safety. In 1992, FDA, Congress, and the pharmaceutical industry negotiated the Prescription Drug User Fee Act. These added resources, or user fees, come from drug companies. As a result, CDER has been able to hire more scientists to review marketing applications for drugs. As part of the agreement, CDER set ambitious performance goals regarding drug reviews, standardized policies, improved communications, and streamlined many burdensome rules and regulations. CDER has created a review process that not only honors sound scientific principles, but sound management principles as well. So let's look at the graph on this slide, or the graphic on this slide. Before a drug can be tested in people, the drug company or sponsor performs laboratory and animal tests to discover how well the drug works and whether it's likely to be safe and work in humans. Next, a series of tests in people is begun to determine whether the drug is safe when used to treat a disease and whether it provides a real health benefit. The company sends CDER the evidence from these tests to prove the drug is safe and effective for its intended use. A team of CDER physicians, statisticians, chemists, pharmacologists, and other scientists reviews the company's data and proposed labeling. If this independent and unbiased review establishes that a drug's health benefits outweigh its known risks, the drug is approved for sale. We'll dive into the contents of the new drug application, or in other words, what does the FDA review before a drug can be marketed in the US? So there's a long list of requirements to submit a new drug application, and we'll go in depth into some of these items and not necessarily all of them. There's a lot of information required because FDA needs enough information to make a knowledgeable judgment about whether to approve a drug application or refuse to approve a drug application according to our regulations, specifically the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. We need to know a full description of the drug substance, including its physical and chemical characteristics and stability. We need to know the name and address of the manufacturer, the method and synthesis or isolation and purification of the drug substance, the process controls used during manufacture and packaging, specifications necessary to ensure the identity, strength, quality, and purity of the drug substance, and bioavailability. So we need tests, analytical procedures, and acceptance criteria relating to sterility, particle size, and crystalline form. And bear with me as we have a lot of information, technical information about what goes into an application that I'm sharing with you. We look at studies of the pharmacological actions of the drug in relation to its proposed therapeutic indication, and studies that define the pharmacologic properties of the drug or are pertinent to possible adverse effects. We look at studies of toxicological effects of the drug as they relate to the drug's intended clinical uses, including studies assessing the drug's acute, subacute, and chronic toxicity, carcinogenicity, according to the particular mode of administration or conditions of use. Where appropriate, we look for studies on the effects of the drug on reproduction and on the developing fetus. We look at absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. And we ask for a statement that the studies were conducted in compliance with good laboratory practices, or an explanation of why they were not conducted in compliance. We look at bioavailability and pharmacokinetic studies, including analytical procedures and statistical methods used in each study, and a statement that they were in compliance with Institutional Review Board regulations. We ask for the rationale for establishing the tests, analytical procedures, and acceptance criteria, including the data. We also ask for a summarizing discussion and analysis of the pharmacokinetics and metabolism of the active ingredients, and bioavailability and bioequivalence. This microbiology section is pertinent only to anti-infective drugs. If it is an anti-infective drug, we ask for the biochemical basis of the drug's action on microbial physiology. We ask for the antimicrobial spectra of the drug, including results of in vitro preclinical studies to demonstrate concentrations of the drug required for effective use. We asked for mechanisms of resistance to the drug, including results of any known epidemiologic studies about resistance factors. And we asked for microbiology laboratory procedures, for example, in vitro sensitivity discs. We asked for a description and analysis of each clinical pharmacology study of the drug, including a comparison of the results of human studies with animal data. We look at protocol and statistical analyses of these studies. If the study report is an interim analysis, we ask for a projected completion date of the study. And if a study has not been analyzed in detail for any reason, we want to know why, maybe because they have been discontinued or the study is incomplete. If any of these studies are not controlled, we want a description of the study and a summary of the results and an explanation of why the study is not controlled. We ask for any other data or information relevant to the safety and effectiveness of the drug product from any source, foreign or domestic, including information derived from clinical investigations, studies of the drug for other uses other than those proposed in the application. We ask for commercial marketing experience, reports in the scientific literature, and unpublished scientific papers. And finally, we ask for an integrated summary of the data demonstrating substantial evidence of effectiveness for the claimed indications. Evidence is required to support the dosage and administration, including support for the dosage and dose interval recommended. The effectiveness data must be presented by gender, age, and racial subgroups, and must identify any modifications of dose or dose interval needed for specific subgroups. We also ask for information about patients with renal failure or patients with different levels of severity of the disease. And we need an integrated summary of all available information about the safety of the drug product, including pertinent animal data, demonstrated or potential adverse effects of the drug, clinically significant drug-drug interactions, and any other safety considerations, such as data from epidemiological studies of related drugs. The safety data must also be presented by gender, age, and racial subgroups. The applicant must update periodically its pending application with new safety information that may affect the statement of contraindications, warnings, precautions, and adverse reactions in the draft labeling and medication guide. Case report forms for each patient who died during a clinical study must be included, and also any patients who did not complete the study because an adverse event happened. The applicant must submit these reports with the initial application also 4 months after the initial submission. And also if FDA sends a complete response letter, we also ask for updated adverse event information. If a drug has potential for abuse, we ask for a description and analysis of studies related to abuse and a proposal for scheduling under the Controlled Substances Act. We ask for a description of any studies related to overdosage, including information on dialysis, antidotes, or other treatments if known. We look at a summary of the benefits and risks of the drug, including a discussion of why do the benefits exceed the risks under the conditions stated in the labeling. If any of this research was done by a contract research organization, we want to know exactly what responsibilities were transferred to that organization and the identity of that contract research organization. This is my last slide about the contents of the application. If there is any part that is not in English, we do ask for English translation. And if an applicant is referring to research that they didn't conduct themselves, they must obtain a right of reference to that data, including a written statement signed by the owner of the data that the FDA can access the underlying raw data that provide the basis for the application for the data that's submitted by the applicant. We want to know if there's any patent information and if there's been any studies done in pediatric populations, whether they be controlled or uncontrolled, anything that is relevant to safety and effectiveness and benefits in pediatric populations. This wraps up the contents of a new drug application, or in other words, what FDA looks at before a drug is approved. Now we're going to transition to who is actually reviewing the application. The people that review the contents of the application are located in the Office of New Drugs. And as you can see, the scientific review staff come from many different disciplines. There's physicians, pharmacologists, regulatory project managers, chemists, statisticians, microbiologists. And these are all, the Office of New Drugs is divided up into therapeutic categories. So for example, if a pharmaceutical company submits an application for a cardiology drug, the cardiology review division will review that application, and they are familiar with other cardiology drugs. They are familiar with the physiology of that system and also disease states involving that system. I want to briefly mention generic drugs because generic drugs are approved in a very different way than brand name drugs. The process for approving generic drugs is different. And it takes time for FDA to review the complex information needed to demonstrate that a given generic drug can be substituted for a brand name drug that it copies. The amount of time that FDA takes to review a generic application depends on the complexity of the drug product and the completeness of the application that's submitted by the sponsor. In the United States, 9 out of 10 prescriptions filled are for generic drugs. So FDA is very much in favor of increasing the availability of generic drugs because that helps create competition in the marketplace, which then helps to make treatment more affordable and increases access to healthcare for more patients. We will next go into public health emergencies and specifically how FDA has been involved in the COVID-19 response. As you can see, FDA has been involved in ensuring the availability of COVID-19 tests, medical equipment, and products for treatment. We've been involved in the food supply chain and other medical product availability. We have helped with the development of COVID-19 vaccines. And we've also stopped the sale of products that made fraudulent claims related to COVID-19, either the treatment or prevention of infection. I was asked to speak about emergency use authorizations, which you may have seen in the news. Emergency use authorizations, or EUAs, they strengthen FDA's response to protect public health, in addition to our medical countermeasures. This is not necessarily under CDER, but the EUAs give a specific purpose in giving authority to FDA to make available therapies during an emergency. CDER does have a program to address the COVID-19 pandemic specifically, and that's called the Coronavirus Treatment Acceleration Program, which I'll go into a little bit later in the presentation. I'd like to show a video that describes the EUA process.
Americans rely on the FDA to evaluate whether medical products, such as drugs, diagnostic tests, and other medical devices, have been shown to be safe and effective. When a public health emergency hits, like the infectious disease outbreak we're facing with COVID-19, there may be an urgent need for products to diagnose, treat, or prevent a medical threat. In certain types of emergencies, the FDA can issue an emergency use authorization, or EUA, to provide more timely access to drugs, diagnostic tests, or other critical medical products that may help during the emergency when there are no adequate, approved, and available options. The EUA process is different than full approval of these products because in some emergency situations, we just cannot wait for all the evidence needed for full FDA approval. Instead, the FDA evaluates the options very quickly using the evidence that is available and carefully balances any known or potential risks of these unproven products with any known or potential benefits to the public of making them available during the emergency. For example, while we need to move quickly, it is not in the best interest of Americans for the FDA to allow use of a test that doesn't work as it should. False test results can contribute to the spread of an infectious disease like COVID-19. EUAs are just one of several tools the FDA can use to help make important medical products available quickly during emergencies. For more information on FDA's efforts against COVID-19, please visit fda.gov.
Just a moment, please. Okay, switching back to our slides here. In my center, which is CDER, we have made resources available specifically to industry. For example, through the Coronavirus Treatment Acceleration Program, which includes a team of physicians and scientists that will review potential treatments for COVID-19. I was also asked to address how FDA cooperates with international regulators. And This slide shows a list of organizations that FDA is involved with. We realize that harmonization of regulatory requirements has many benefits, such as ensuring favorable marketing conditions to support early access to medicinal products. It also promotes competition and efficiency and reduces unnecessary duplication of clinical testing. One example of FDA's cooperation with international regulators is the implementation of the Mutual Recognition Agreement, MRA, for inspections of manufacturing sites for certain human medicines in their respective territories. This allows drug inspectors to rely upon information from inspections conducted within each other's borders. Also, in 2012, the Food and Drug Administration Safety and Innovation Act was enacted, and that gives FDA the authority to enter into agreements to recognize drug inspections conducted by foreign regulatory authorities if FDA determined those authorities are capable of conducting inspections that meet US requirements. I want to leave you with these resources, and hopefully these slides will be shared with the group. With many of these links, you'll be able to access the contact information for FDA, including for the Division of Drug Information, and you are more than welcome to call with questions, whether you are a healthcare provider or you're in a pharmaceutical industry or you're with a regulatory organization. So please feel free to reach out to us. We are here to answer your questions. So I thank you so much for your attention, and I will ask for your questions now.
Joy, un placer haberte escuchado, realmente muy claros tus conceptos y nos da una visión bien amplia de todo el trabajo que hay detrás de poner un medicamento en el mercado para asegurar su eficacia, su calidad y su seguridad. Nombraste en tu presentación, y recojo algunas de las consultas que me están llegando de los que están en este momento conectados, de que están trabajando mucho con las aprobaciones de medicamentos genéricos. Nosotros acá en nuestras latitudes y las agencias regulatorias que están trabajando en América Latina, es uno de los puntos que tenemos que consensuar los requisitos mínimos necesarios para la armonización de registros de genéricos. Entonces, si fueras tan amable y pudieras nuevamente marcar cuáles son esos requisitos para la FDA, y si tienes alguna información en relación a la cantidad de estos registros que se imparten por la FDA en relación a medicamentos innovadores, o una idea aproximada también sería interesante. En realidad, nuestro mercado también es un mercado con mucha presencia de genéricos que obviamente, como tú marcabas, tiene la posibilidad de asegurar el acceso a los pacientes a los tratamientos. No sé si puedes responder esas consultas.
Thank you. I'm going to address your first question first about what are the requirements for the approval of a generic drug, if I understand correctly. The manufacturer of the generic drug has to prove that the product is equivalent to the brand name drug. So of course it has to have the same active ingredient. The inactive ingredients can differ, but they cannot interfere with the effectiveness of the active ingredient. So essentially they have to prove bioavailability and bioequivalence. That's the bottom line requirements for generic drug approval. Now, did I answer your first question?
Perfecto, perfecto. Y también últimamente es muy interesante los bioequivalentes, ¿no? El mercado de medicamentos en todo el mundo cada vez es más desafiante para los técnicos en relación a que los productos en sí cada vez son más complejos. Entonces esto obviamente aplica y tiene más complejidad por el volumen de información que hay que contrastar cuando hablamos también de medicamentos biológicos. ¿No es así, Joy?
Yes, definitely. I think FDA is actually recently putting out a lot of guidance for manufacturers of complex generics because it can be more and more complicated to prove that their product is equivalent. Yes, and we put the burden on the manufacturer to prove that scientifically. So it's FDA does conduct some testing, but the burden of proof is upon the manufacturer.
Perfecto. Muchas gracias. La otra pregunta sería, tú nos compartías los funcionarios y las diferentes profesiones que interactúan y forman parte del equipo de profesionales que valoran toda esta información. Quería consultarte si está establecido un plan de capacitación continua o un periodo de inducción previa y cómo se manejan en relación a asegurar que no haya fuga de talentos en la agencia, que es otro de los problemas que tenemos en estas latitudes.
Yes, there is a lot of training involved with reviewing drugs, and even in my division, which is Division of Drug Information, I can say for and a new employee in my division, training is at least 6 months long, and it's very closely supervised. I don't know specifically the requirements for training for the employees in the Office of New Drugs, but I imagine that it's similarly rigorous. FDA has its own training department. We call it Division of Learning and Organizational Development. And there's specific training for employees in the Office of New Drugs. And there's general training for all FDA employees that's offered on a regular basis. And we've been offering that training virtually or online recently. But for example, if they want to hire someone to review cardiology drugs, they would seek a cardiologist or someone who has experience, training, education in cardiology specifically. There's really no other organizations in the US that do something similar to what FDA does in terms of reviewing applications. We know, of course, there are many pharmaceutical companies in the US, so there may be some employees that have come from the pharmaceutical industry that may be familiar with regulatory requirements. But in general, when a new employee comes to FDA, they would have to receive extensive training on the regulations. I took a class called Drug Law. That was very new to me because as a clinician, I was not familiar with the regulation of drugs. This is something new that I had to learn as an FDA employee. So definitely a lot of training is done for FDA employees.
Perfecto, Joy, muchas gracias. Leo otra pregunta del público, que te dicen que es una excelente presentación y te agradecen, y si podrías ampliar los requisitos microbiológicos para los antibióticos respecto a los estudios de resistencia.
Yes, I don't have a lot of detail about resistance studies except to say that when an antimicrobial drug is submitted for FDA approval, we need to know mechanisms of resistance. We need to know about other antimicrobials in that class and how resistance has developed. We need to know about the antimicrobial spectra. So we do expect for some research to be conducted before an application can be approved. I might be able to provide you greater details. If you would like greater details, I can send that to you via email, or we can talk after our session. I don't have anything additional this time.
Claro que sí, lo agradecemos desde ya, Joy. Perfecto. Te transfiero otra pregunta. ¿Se tiene información que luego de la aprobación de una droga por la FDA, con todos estos pasos, algunas agencias que no estén calificadas aún o si lo están, usan esta aprobación para una vía rápida de ingreso al mercado de esos países? O sea, ¿tú sabes si hay países que toman los registros de FDA únicamente como medio para validar el registro local?
I have limited knowledge about this. I know that FDA frequently cooperates with EMA and looks at what EMA's concerns are about a drug, and I would expect that maybe similar things happen with the EMA. Maybe they look at FDA information too. But unfortunately, I don't have specific information on like which countries have used FDA's information. There is quite a bit of information on the FDA website. For example, when a drug is approved, FDA posts the entire summary review on the website. So that's open for anyone to review, whether it be other countries or healthcare providers or researchers. I can definitely see what other information I can provide and communicate with you after our session.
Perfecto, perfecto. ¿Por qué crees que la FDA se toma como referencia para otros países? Son una agencia de mucha historia, ¿verdad? Y con procesos muy fuertes. ¿Ustedes lo tienen tan claro que son referencia para muchos de estos países, tal vez con regulaciones más nuevas en relación a medicamentos, a productos tecnológicos?
I think in some ways, I know that some other countries do look to FDA, at least for an explanation of why we've made the decisions we've made. And we do interact with many other countries. For example, we had a seminar yesterday where there were 93 countries represented. And that's likely because there are manufacturers in many countries that want to market drugs in the US. And so they want to know about US regulations. We also receive phone calls and emails in the Division of Drug Information with questions about the drugs that are approved in the US and how we approve drugs. And I know I've personally received some phone calls. I remember one phone call from a consumer in Switzerland saying, if you sell it in the US, doesn't that mean it's safe? And so I had to explain to her how we review drugs, and actually FDA does not review every single drug that's being marketed in the US. So that came as a surprise to her. So I know that FDA is on the world stage, but I also know that we're one of the many regulatory organizations that have important input to offer.
Perfecto, Joy, muy clara tu respuesta. La siguiente consulta que te envía las personas que están conectadas en este momento: ¿qué grado de independencia tiene un inspector de la FDA para tomar decisiones sobre clausuras o sanciones por incumplimiento en plantas farmacéuticas?
Okay, so at FDA, no decisions are made in isolation. This is very much a team approach. And the procedures for inspections are actually posted online. You can actually find on the FDA website the standard operating procedures for inspections. So inspectors are expected to follow those instructions and work closely with the team lead. When there's a decision made to close a plant or to issue an import alert, for example, if it's a manufacturer in a different country, that decision is made by the center and not a specific individual. I hope that answers the question.
Nos comentabas que el marco normativo en el cual se basa este accionar inspectivo está presente en la página de FDA, disponible y de acceso libre. Bien, perfecto.
Yes, that is correct. The Manual of Policies and Procedures for Inspections is available on the FDA website. So the pharmaceutical manufacturer could...
Si no recuerdo mal, Perfecto.
Sorry, please.
También están disponibles los reportes de auditoría, ¿verdad? En algunos casos.
That is true. Inspection reports are available on the FDA website. Yes.
Bien, una valiosa información realmente. Tú ya nos habías hablado de los acuerdos internacionales con estados o países u otras agencias. ¿Existe en esos acuerdos un intercambio de reportes u homologaciones de autorizaciones de funcionamiento de plantas o digamos, de productos? ¿Cómo funcionan esos acuerdos? Porque es otra de los temas que vemos y por los cuales desde la asociación vemos la importancia de dar el paso y convertirnos en una agencia de vigilancia de referencia, de poder hacer asociaciones con otras agencias y poder de esa forma fortalecer la capacidad de respuesta y de trabajo.
I would encourage you to take a look at the Mutual Recognition Agreement, which was issued a few years ago, I think maybe 2018, and look for some specific information on how drug inspectors can rely upon information from inspections conducted in other countries. And then also take a look specifically at the Food and Drug Administration Safety and Innovation Act. We call that FDASIA, F-D-A-S-I-A. And that will tell you more about the agreements to recognize drug inspections conducted in foreign countries and how FDA determines whether inspectors in other countries are capable of conducting the inspections that meet US requirements. I don't have more specific information in terms of the agreements, the specific agreements that FDA has made with other countries, just those general acts that have been enacted recently.
Perfecto, Joy. Te leo otra consulta. La pregunta específicamente está relacionada al vínculo con la Agencia Europea de Medicamentos. Ambas son agencias de evaluación de alta vigilancia. ¿Existen sinergias entre ambas autoridades actualmente relacionadas a la evaluación de los medicamentos? O sea, más allá de compartir informes de auditoría y de plantas, también comparten esta información que tú nos has mostrado, cómo es el proceso de evaluación de medicamentos específicamente.
Thank you for that question. I am not aware of what specifically is shared when FDA is working together with EMA or other international organizations, but the summary review of each drug product is available on the Drugs at FDA website, so that is available for the public to see. If you would like more information on that, I'd be glad to get back to you.
Perfecto. Consultarte, en este momento de pandemia en donde obviamente el trabajo y la exigencia para los equipos regulatorios han sido muy altas, ¿cómo entiendes que han podido responder? O sea, ¿cuáles han sido las fortalezas dentro de la FDA que ha llevado a que, hoy por hoy tengan los procesos funcionando, estas autorizaciones de emergencia, y lo hayan aplicado tanto para vacunas como para estudios clínicos de alternativas, que son muchos? O sea, basta ver el registro de investigaciones clínicas en desarrollo. O sea, el trabajo realmente ha aumentado exponencialmente. ¿Cuál entiendes tú que han sido las fortalezas de la agencia para poder dar respuesta a esta situación que era impensable hace un año atrás?
Excuse me, I have a dry throat.
Okay.
Sorry. I have to say, just from my limited perspective, I have observed the same thing, that the Office of New Drugs seems to have stepped up their activity. Sorry about that. And when we look at work reports over the last year to year and a half, it shows that we have been more productive than when we were in the office. So if you don't know, FDA has strongly encouraged employees to work from home. And we've had amazing IT support so that we've been able to meet virtually. We've been able to call each other and speak and cooperate and not decrease our work volume at all, but rather increase what we're able to accomplish. I've been working with the division of antiviral products, and I see the amount of work that is coming in terms of researchers wanting to submit investigational new drug applications and also all the new drug applications that are coming in. And it seems like FDA has stepped up to the plate to address this pandemic. There are people who are working a lot of hours, but I feel like FDA also considers work-life balance and ensuring that people stay connected to their families and to their coworkers in a community. So I'm really impressed with how FDA has treated its employees in terms of support at work and their leadership. It really seems like leadership is looking out for the employees, and then also that the employees are stepping up to the plate. They're just very motivated. We see this as an opportunity to address a worldwide pandemic, and we're very excited to assist however we can, and we've been assisting in so many different ways.
Perfecto, realmente, bueno, felicitarlos, ¿no? Porque poder armarse y dar respuesta rápida a esta situación, realmente una situación muy compleja hemos vivido todos. Ya llegando al final, Joy, agradeciéndote muchísimo el que estés aquí y abierta a compartirnos cómo es el trabajo día a día de la FDA, el compartirnos tu presentación, fuentes de información y quedar a disposición para aportarnos más información. ¿Cómo ves una parte crucial del trabajo de las agencias? Es la información continua a sus pacientes, ¿no? a la salud pública. Entonces, ¿cómo es el mecanismo de difusión pública ante una alerta por un producto que se debe retirar del mercado? O sea, ¿cómo se asegura la FDA que la información emergente de seguridad de un producto llega a quien tiene que llegar, ya sea a los médicos, prescriptores de medicamentos, o al usuario final, al paciente?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question because that's specifically what my division handles, disseminating information to the public and also industry and healthcare professionals. So there's many different means that we use. One primary way is through our website. We post updates and you can sign up for emails on recalls, on warnings, on any changes, on new guidances that FDA publishes. There's also communication via webinars. We're very active on social media. On Twitter, I've heard that we have something like 75,000 followers, and I think a lot of those are from industry. We also have a Facebook page primarily geared towards consumers. And in the Division of Drug Information, we have a phone number that's staffed every day with pharmacists. So we answer questions from anyone and everyone over the phone and also with the email. There's podcasts that we use to disseminate information. We don't necessarily have authority over what goes into the news, but we do know that many people in the media do pick up announcements that FDA makes. Of course, there's direct communication with sponsors or the pharmaceutical industry from the Office of New Drugs about specific applications that are going on, but there's definitely a lot of channels of communications that FDA uses. We even respond to handwritten letters.
Muy buen dato, Joy. O sea que utilizan todas las herramientas que tienen a disposición para llegar a ese usuario final. Bueno, muy interesante realmente. Joy, llegando ya al final de tu ponencia, si quieres, bueno, algo más que entiendas que quieras compartirnos en esta etapa en la que estamos queriendo tener en Uruguay el desarrollo de una agencia de vigilancia sanitaria que cumpla con todos los procesos que tú nos has dicho. ¿Algo más que quieras transmitirnos?
I'm honored to meet with your organization, and I would encourage you to use the links in the slideshow that I provided, specifically the small business and industry assistance, because we give a lot of very detailed information on how to interact with FDA. Please feel free to call us. We have a toll-free number, and we'll be glad to provide any information that you're interested in. Take a look at our Code of Federal Regulations of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. I think there's a lot of information on the FDA website that could be helpful to you. And please feel free to reach out to me also specifically. Thank you so much for having me.
Muchísimas gracias, ha sido así, fue muy ameno poder contactarlos y tuvimos una respuesta inmediata a nuestra solicitud. Así que solo me resta agradecerte muchísimo tu tiempo, tu claridad, tu profesionalidad para transmitir cómo trabajan en la FDA en relación a los procesos que llevan adelante para poner un medicamento liberado al uso público. Joy, seguimos en contacto, esperamos esa información que nos prometiste, te deseamos un buen fin de jornada y nos tomamos 5 minutos, te invitamos a permanecer en el seminario, vamos a tener a continuación, luego de 5 minutos de descanso, a las 3:10, la conferencia de la doctora Enrique Altieri de la EMA. Nos tomamos 5 minutos de descanso.
We've been deceived.